Good morning. The title of our lesson today is A Greater Kindness. I've been teaching on Ruth. The teachings I'm going off of Matthew 1 through 6, the genealogy of Christ. We're talking about the women who are listed in that genealogy. If you go to the next slide, it shows that scripture. And in bold, you can see the names. We've already talked about Tamar. We've talked about Rahab. And now we're talking about Ruth. In chapter 1, we met Naomi, who was a Jew living in Moab, and her daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah. They were all widowed. And Naomi had decided to return to Bethlehem now that the famine was over there, and her husband was gone and her sons were gone. And the two daughter-in-laws, wanted to go with her, but she kindly advises them, no, stay here with your own people. Find rest in the home of a new husband. She's like, start over again, make your life here. That's going to be so much better than if you come with me to a strange land where you're going to be a foreigner. She had this kindness, this love for them, that she wanted what was best for them. She put their needs ahead of her own. They both cry and protest and tell her how much they love her. But in the end, Orpah decides to stay. But Ruth says no. She clings to her mother-in-law and says, where you go, I go. Your people are my people. Your God, my God. Even when Naomi seems very down, feels like God has left her, she wants to call herself Mara, meaning bitter. Ruth still has seen too much. She has seen God in Naomi's life, and she wants to stay with Naomi. Then in chapter 2, we talked about how once they were back in Bethlehem, Ruth comes to know that it's a custom there that for the poor, the widow, the orphan, that they could glean the fields. And she says, Naomi, let me go and do it. And so she selflessly goes and she does the work to provide for her and for Naomi. And it just so happens she ends up in the field of a man named Boaz, who is a near relative to her father-in-law. And she works the field. She works very hard. Her hard work is noted by the supervisor, by the other workers, and by Boaz. They see how hard she works. And we talked a lot about character. Character counts. We saw the character of Boaz, how he was warmly greeted by his workers, how he became very protective of Ruth. He saw what a hard worker she is. He offered her protection and provision. Stay in this field. Stay close to my girls. I've, told the men not to do anything to you. They called her, oh, that's the Moabite, but Boaz called her daughter. He saw, this is someone who is in my family. This is Naomi's daughter-in-law, and so he saw her as family. And as one of the leaders of the family, he wanted to protect her. And of course, Naomi is overjoyed at this. Her bitter is getting better. As you trust God, your bitter will get better. And she tells Ruth it's good that she should listen to his advice and stay safe in those fields. So they came into Bethlehem. It was at the beginning of the harvest. And it says at the end of chapter 2 that she gleaned in Boaz's field with the servants until the harvest was finished. So this is roughly a period of about 2 months that she's working in the field. They likely saw each other every day. So, when you see somebody every day and you see them in their natural environment, so to speak, at work or at home, over a course of 2 months, you're going to see their true character. When you first meet somebody, it's all nice and everybody's so polite. But you get in there and you're working together and you're having to do hard work, and you'll see times that people if their true character plays out. And then we talked about how this is not a love story the way we think about a love story. We've all seen the Hallmark movies of the love stories, different stories about romance, and that's not what this story is. And it was interesting because as I was studying and trying to look at different commentaries and seeing what other people had commented about it, a lot of them leaned in that direction. And but that's not what it is. It's this is a story, it is a story about love, but it's not romantic love. It's about love and honor and respect and kindness and trust. It's not about passion and romance. So we're going to start in chapter 3. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. It says, "One day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, 'My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley in the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do.' 'I will do whatever you say,' Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do." When you hear this, and at first glance, and especially somebody who would be unfamiliar with the Bible, unfamiliar with this account of Ruth, this would sound very strange. It could be, misconstrued, taken out of context. It might seem like this is a woman conniving to capture a man and trick him into marriage, to seduce him. It kind of gives that kind of impression, right? This is the stuff of soap operas. I don't know about you, but my generation, we grew up watching soap operas with our mothers. Probably learned a lot of stuff we shouldn't have learned at the time. But, it was always a lot of drama and a lot of this kind of behavior that this seems to imply of manipulation and trying to make things happen. But let's think about what we talked about in the last chapter. We talked a lot about these people's characters. We talked about Ruth. We talked about Boaz, the kind of characters they have. That same kindness that she had when she initially told her daughter-in-laws to stay in Moab to start a new life with husbands, it's still there. At the beginning here, Naomi is saying to her, we've got to find a home for you. And what she's meaning is you need a husband. Naomi knows, she's an old woman. She's getting older. She's not going to get any younger. She can't provide for Ruth. And someday she's going to be gone, and Ruth's going to be alone in this country. And she needs a husband. She needs a family. So she's still thinking of Ruth's well-being. She's putting her well-being ahead of her own. Being a foreigner and a widow would make her very vulnerable. And it's the same kind of language here that was used in that first chapter where she said, stay here and find rest in the home of a husband. She's wanting to find a home where Ruth can be settled, be provided for, be protected. Now, being a Moabite in Bethlehem, it kind of limits her ability to find a husband. And so Naomi knows that according to their customs, because she is a widow, a family redeemer could marry Ruth. Herself, she knows she's too old. She couldn't bear children again. She doesn't need a redeemer to marry her, a kinsman redeemer. But she could have Ruth be married. And she reminds her, Boaz, who you've been working for all these past few months, I just want to remind you, he's one of our close relatives. He is one of these kinsman redeemers. And just as a reminder of what those redeemers' responsibilities are, if you go to the next slide there, the Goel, meaning redeemer, a kinsman redeemer, referring to a close relative responsible for rescuing, protecting, and restoring a family member's land, freedom, or honor. It carries deep legal and familial obligations, frequently describing God's role in saving Israel or an individual in the Hebrew Bible. They were responsible to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery, responsible to be the avenger of blood to make sure the murderer of a family member answered for the crime, responsible to buy back family land that had been forfeited, and responsible to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow, which is what Ruth was. So they redeem, they restore, and they protect the family. So Naomi knew that Boaz was a man of honor and would fulfill these responsibilities if he was called upon. But how do you get there? How do you get that conversation? How do you mediate that to make that happen? And Naomi comes up with a plan for that. She considers that he would be a good husband for Ruth, even though there seems to be, from what we kind of get, is that there's a pretty big age difference. There's cultural differences. So, how do you get this going? And the harvest is ending. They've been seeing each other every day working in the fields, and the harvest is coming to an end. So they're not going to see each other every day anymore. She sees that window of opportunity is closing, and it's now time to take some kind of an action. So how do you do it? Well, do you do it the soap opera way? Do you become Alexis Carrington? Does she storm into Boaz's farm office and say, "You are a kinsman redeemer, and it's your responsibility to do this, and if you don't, I'm going to tell everybody your grain is tainted"? That's the way they do it in the soap opera world. They threaten, they blackmail, No, that's not Naomi's character, right? We've seen these people's character over time. So she gives her some other instructions. This, at first, sound a little weird to her. That might sound a little provocative to some people. Wash yourself and put on perfume, put on your best clothes. These are all outward attributes. It's about the way that she looks, right? And we've spent all this time, a whole chapter, talking about character. But these are all things that appeal to the senses. And Ruth herself might have been a little surprised and wondered why Naomi would ask her to do this. But she trusts Naomi. She says, "I'll do whatever you say." How many times has God asked you to do something out of the ordinary that seemed a little sus at first, that you were like, "I don't know about this. This just seems weird. I'm just going to hang back and just kind of see how this plays out." And we miss because we don't trust, right? So up to this point, Boaz has seen Ruth in a certain way. Oh, this is Naomi's daughter-in-law. This is somebody that I want to look out for. She's a hard worker. He calls her daughter. She's been a servant working along with his other women in the field. She works hard. He's probably seen her at her worst, right? At the end of the day, all sweaty and dirty and whatever. But Naomi wants Boaz to see her differently. He wants to see her as a potential wife, that she could be that role. When you go for a job description, do you go from working in your garden in your jeans and your sweaty bandana on your head and then go to the job interview? Has he done that? You're looking back there at him. I feel like there's a story there somewhere just from the look you're getting from your wife. But no, you don't do that. What do? You take a shower. You put on your perfume or your aftershave. You put on your best suit, your best dress, whatever you're going to wear to the interview, because you want to make a good impression. You want that person to be able to see you as being in that role. They say dress for the job you want. Well, I'm going to show up work tomorrow with my tiara on, So he wants Boaz to have a different perspective of her. So that's why she tells her to clean herself up and dress this way. It's also a sign that she is no longer that woman in mourning. She's been in a period of mourning for her husband. And so this is like to symbolize that she is now ready, that this mourning period is over, and she is ready to start I'm getting chills, a new phase in her life with a new husband. So Boaz needed to see her this way. Now Naomi knew, with it being the end of the harvest, that Boaz would be on the threshing floor. He would be, because he was a hands-on kind of guy. He was at the threshing floor. He was winnowing the barley. And I think I have a picture here of what that looks like. They have this winnowing fork, and they toss it into the air, and the wind takes away the stuff that's not any good. They tossed the barley into the evening breeze with a winnowing fork to separate the stalk from the chaff of the straw which the wind blows away. And John the Baptist used this imagery when talking about Jesus and the judgment to come. His winnowing fork is in his hand, and he will clear his threshing floor, gathering his wheat into the barn and burning up the chaff with unquenchable fire. So they did a lot of this in the evening because they spent the day, working in the field and the harvest. So this was something they would do in the evening. So Boaz, he probably packed himself a dinner, something that he knew he would enjoy, so that at the end of the day he could eat. He came prepared to spend the night on the threshing floor. Remember, this was during the time of the judges. So this was a time where there was, gangs would come through and they would steal grain from people. Remember when the story of Gideon, where was he threshing his wheat? He was down in a wine press. He was hiding from the Midianites so that he could get that threshed and protect it from, bands of Midianites coming in and stealing it. So Naomi is familiar with this kind of routine. Perhaps even her husband, when they lived there, that they did the same thing. So she knows that he's going to be at the threshing floor, he's going to be there, he's going to have a meal, and then he's going to lay down and go to sleep. She knows that he's going to be doing this. So she tells Ruth, wait till he's asleep. Then you're going to uncover his feet, and you're going to lie down there, and then do whatever he says. She said, just do whatever he says. So Ruth, she just says, I will do whatever you say. Whatever you say. So verses 7 through 9. So when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. So it says that Boaz, he was eating and drinking in good spirits. This does not mean that he was down at the threshing floor getting drunk, okay? So that's a lot of people try to read this into it, like that this is a story of seduction and they got him drunk first and things like that. No. He's put in a hard day's work. He's had his meal. He's in good spirits. He feels good about his day, and he's laying down and he's going to go to sleep. It says in the New King James Version that he had eaten and drunk and his heart was cheerful. So Boaz, he's a happy guy. He's got a good life. He's a happy guy. Again, that speaks to his character. Didn't take much to make him happy. A hard day's work, a good meal, place to lay down and go to sleep. He was a blessed man. So then it says once he goes to sleep, what she does. Now, does it say that she got under his covers and snuggled up close to him and put her arm over his chest? Anything like that? Does it say that? Mm-mm. Do you know how many pictures I found where that's the way it looked, that Ruth was laying next to him? If you search images. Totally not what the word says, okay? It says that she laid at his feet. She uncovered his feet. Not necessarily the most attractive part of a person, at least for most people. But there was symbolism in her laying at his feet. It showed submission and trust. Okay? It was an act of humility, showing surrender to someone's authority and requesting protection and guidance. It was not a sexual overture. It was not her coming to seduce him at all. It was an act of surrender. And so something startles him. It could be the fact his feet got cold. It might be what woke him up. But he wakes up and he sees a woman at his feet, and he doesn't know who it is because she looks a lot different, right? We just talked about how her appearance would be different because she cleaned herself up. So he has to say, and it's dark on top of that, who are you? And so she says, I am Ruth, I'm your servant. And then Ruth lays it all out on the table in kind of one sentence. She said, I am your servant Ruth, that's who I am. I want you to spread the corner of your garment over me, And the reason is because you're a guardian redeemer of our family. In the New King James Version, it says, take your maidservant under your wing. The symbolism of that, of either saying take me under your wing or to cover me with your garment, means take me as your wife. This was how they symbolized take me as your wife. And the reason is because you are one of our families. They call it in this version guardian redeemer, but the kinsman redeemer, it's your role. You have a right to do this. And so she's claiming that right. But she's doing it in the most humble way. Like I said, she could have gone all Alexis Carrington and came in and demanded, what was due her. But no, she's coming in very humble. And I can only imagine after she says this, because, she's basically asked him to marry her. I can imagine her holding her breath, waiting to see how Boaz is going to react. What will he do? Will he be angry, upset that she's done this? Will he be offended? Will he laugh at her? Those are the things that when we put ourselves out there and we make ourselves vulnerable to people, those are the fears that come up in us, aren't we? Are people going to accept me? Am I going to be laughed at? Are people going to be offended by me? What is that reaction going to be? We have to trust, right? And that's a very hard thing to do sometimes. But, she has seen him over these many weeks, that she knows that he's a kind person, he's a generous person. So her hope is that is the response that she's going to get. But you always, you wonder, at what point have you pushed and gone over the line, maybe for someone, right? Verses 10 through 13. So here's his reaction. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until the morning." So Boaz responds with, just like we thought he might with his character. He responds kindly, gently. And he sees Ruth's motives in this. He knows that he's an older guy. He's probably not, on the cover of Sexiest Man Alive in Jerusalem. Probably not. No. She could have gone for younger men, more her age, whether they be rich or poor, And he knows he's among the rich. But he sees her true motives is that she is still thinking of Naomi. This isn't just about Ruth getting a husband. Ruth is also thinking about Naomi. Because if Ruth has this husband in Boaz, she knows not only is she going to be taken care of, but Naomi is going to be taken care of. And he says, you remember back in when they first met in the last chapter, he said, "I've heard about all you've done for your mother-in-law." He had already heard about her and heard about her good character and the things that she had sacrificed to provide this care for Naomi. And he appreciated that. He says, "I know you've done everything, for Naomi since the death of your husband. You left your father and mother, your homeland, to follow Naomi to this foreign land to care for her." He had seen her work tirelessly in the fields. He didn't ask for any kind of special treatment. She worked just like the servants. And now she was also willing to marry for Naomi's sake. So we've got Naomi who's looking out for Ruth, who's saying, "We got to provide you for a husband." And we've got Ruth who is willing to go and marry Boaz because this will be good for them, even though she could have had a younger man, you know. And Boaz, moved by the love and loyalty that he sees with these two women, and knows that he's in a position to do this, to do good, and is willing to do it. So they're all looking out for each other. And that's the way it is with us. If we are always looking out for the other person, putting their needs ahead of our own, and they're doing that for us, then everybody's going to get what they need, right? If everybody's doing that. I know sometimes it feels like you're the only one who's doing it. But remember that God also sees it. And he's going to make sure that you have what you need. So that's what he means by that greater kindness. That not only would she leave her homeland, but now that she would also submit herself to Boaz and have this marriage that would provide for them. And I do think she very much respected Boaz. There's a couple of verses, Philippians 2:3-4 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves." So this is scriptural. "Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." John 15:13, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And I've talked about this before. I mean, we tend to think of this about somebody being willing to die for someone, like literally, like our servicemen and women, our like police officers, firemen, those types of people that, run into the danger instead of running away. But each of us can lay down our lives every single day when we put aside our, what we want to do, and do stuff for other people and put their interests ahead of our own. And what does Boaz say? He says, "Don't be afraid." How many times do we hear in the Bible, "Fear not, don't be afraid"? Whether it's God saying it or one of the angels that he has sent, we hear, "Do not be afraid." Boaz says that he is willing to be her kinsman redeemer. He says, everyone knows what a noble woman you are. I see it. Everyone sees it. He would be honored to be her redeemer and be her husband. But Boaz, true to character, he is a man who goes by the book. And he lets her know, Ruth has made it known that she's no longer in mourning. She wishes to exercise this claim to be redeemed. It's out there now. She's no longer in mourning. The cat's out of the bag. She's ready for a new beginning. So now that that's known, Boaz says there is a man who is more closely related. And what that means is that man has the first option to be the redeemer, to be her kinsman redeemer. As much as Boaz would love to do it, and they've established this relationship, it doesn't change the fact that there's somebody else that has that right first. And he will not circumvent that process. He knows that that's the right thing to do. And so he says, let's find out what this man wants to do. And if he wants to do it, if he wants to be the kinsman redeemer and marry you, good. Because then we're doing this in order the way things are supposed to be done. But if he doesn't, I'm your guy. I'm going to step up and I'm going to do it. He lets her know that. So either way, however it goes, Boaz is still looking out for her, going through this process going forward. Verses 14 and 15. "So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, 'No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor.' He also said, 'Bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out.' And when she did, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town." So notice that she continued to lay at his feet. She stayed in that place under submission because, things were not settled yet. There was no physical intimacy between them at all. So this would deflate any kind of argument that says that that's what this was about, that this was about a woman going to seduce a man at the threshing floor. But that doesn't mean that if somebody had seen her, people wouldn't say things, make those kind of comments. They didn't have anything to hide because they hadn't done anything wrong, but they did not want to have that appearance. And also, Boaz may not have wanted the other kinsman redeemer to be aware that Ruth has now said she wants to be redeemed by a kinsman redeemer, and exert that right to that marriage. He doesn't want him to hear it from the gossip mill. He doesn't want to hear it from the buzz around town. Boaz is a man who takes care of things himself, and he wants to be the one. And we're going to be talking about that in the next chapter that we talk about. And before she leaves, Boaz is still thinking about, taking care of them. So he gives them, he's been there getting this barley ready, right? So he's going to give her 6 measures of barley. I read all kinds of things that could symbolize. But one of the things and I thought, oh, here we go. It's the 6-7. Fortunately, the kids are kind of, that's on the way out now. You're not hearing that so much. But 6, that is a number that represents imperfection, incomplete. 7 is that number of completion, perfection. So their arrangement for a possible marriage was not quite complete. There is that promise that if things go and this other gentleman is not interested, that it will be completed. Or it could just be that that's how much he had ready to give her. We can read a lot. Sometimes we try to read stuff into there that's just not there. It's just a fact that was noted that someone wrote down that it was 6 measures. Sometimes we try to read way too much into stuff. And then it ends with 16 and 18. It says, when Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." So Ruth returns to Naomi, gives her report. She followed all of her instructions, and it worked. It's amazing when we follow God's instructions and we're obedient, and then it works, and then we're surprised. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. Naomi knows that Boaz is a man of his word and someone they could trust, and that she knows he's going to get this matter taken care of quickly. She said, but what we have to do is wait. And sometimes that's what we have to do. After we've followed the instructions and we've done what God has asked us to do, sorry, it's not the microwave mentality. We can't just expect it's going to happen, immediately. Sometimes you just got to wait. You got to wait, and then you got to wait. But if we've done what God has asked us to do in the way He asked us to do it, we can trust that there's going to be a good outcome. Like I said, sometimes it seems like God asked us to do some strange things. Sometimes they're simple things, and we think, well, what's the big deal about that? This is not that big a deal. Sometimes it's some really out there things. But if we just would lay at His feet, just lay at His feet and trust Him and listen for those instructions and follow them, what won't He do for us? He won't rest until the matter is settled. He is already working on it. He is working all things together for our good. Amen? Yes.
This story has, over the years, you're right, there have been a lot of portrayals of the romance between the two. And one thing, and I had never thought about it not being that, honestly, over the years, until you started teaching on this, and I thought, well, okay, I inwardly I gave one of the looks you usually give to me outwardly whenever I'm up there teaching. You get that look on your face like, what? And you scrunch it up. I was scrunching up on the inside. But another piece of evidence that it was not a romantic deal up front was where any other woman or any woman that would have an inkling that this should be a romantic move on her own part, laying down at the feet of a guy who says to her, hey, guess what? I appreciate your loyalty. I appreciate what you're doing, but there's somebody else that has first dibs. If she was focused on the romance, I would think that we would see some kind of record in here of her putting up a fight, putting up a fuss, arguing, saying, but you're the one for me, or whatever, going into that route. That's not recorded at all. The tone, the attitude, any of that is not recorded at all in this passage. So, yeah, that's a good call out.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, it's about 10:35. Thanks.